Gentlemen, I'll call the meeting to order, please, and read the affirmation. Tēnā tātou katoa. We seek wisdom, understanding, insights into the views and circumstances of others, strength to seek what we believe in, humility to accept the combined decisions of others, patience, good humour at all times, tolerance and courtesy, while working in the best interests of our community. Councillors, ladies and gentlemen, before I begin, can I just on behalf of all of Council express our condolences to two of our councillors who have lost their fathers in the last couple of weeks. Councillor Linda Cooper, your dad Graham Sanderson passed away, former veteran who served his country, and we share with you your sense of loss. Councillor Greg Sayers, your dad Alan, 102 years old I think, and a public figure in his own right in terms of his role in journalism and photojournalism. So if we could just maybe stand for a minute and observe our condolences, and I'll call on a councillor also to make some comments. Thank you very much. Councillor John Watson has expressed a desire to say a few words about his constituent, Alan Sayers.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. Just on behalf of my ward and fellow councillor Wayne Walker, Alan Sayers was one of the Albany wards, indeed Auckland's most outstanding citizens, and as the Mayor said, passed away just a couple of months shy of 102. Had a remarkably healthy life. Indeed, Alan looked about 30 years younger than his wife, than his age.
And it was nearly a slip.
I was going to say, because I think of June, she looks about 50 years younger than her age too. Just remarkable advert for good, clean, healthy living. Alan was born in the middle of World War I, as you might have worked out. His family started coming up to the Whangapraoa Peninsula in the 1920s when they had a family batch at Little Manly, and he could give very detailed accounts of the steamers plying their trade up from Auckland. He went to Auckland Grammar School, where he was the senior athletics champion, and was one of two grammar boys invited to attend the British Empire Collegiate Games in Melbourne in 1934, where he became the second fastest quarter miler in the British Empire. 4 years later, it was the Full Empire Games, the precursor to the Commonwealth Games, where he picked up a medal as part of the New Zealand quarter mile relay team. When Alan left Auckland Grammar, he went to work at the New Zealand Herald, and after a year in sports, he moved to the general reporting room and spent a year in the photographic department. Alan had a slightly different attitude towards covering sport. He mixed with a number of the top-class players of the time, including people like Bert Cook, and a number of them said to him, well, if you're going to write about us, why don't you turn up and try the sport yourself? So he got a bit of an inside information, and this is what he duly did. He represented Waikato in rugby, and he also played rugby league for Richmond Rovers for 1 year, in which he scored 7 tries in one game, which still stands as the club record for the Auckland Rugby League. So that was athletics, rugby and rugby league. In the late 1930s, unfortunately, Alan had a car accident which curtailed his very promising sporting career, and in turn he then went over to coaching and went on to coach a number of New Zealand athletic champions such as Ron Agate, 7 times national sprint champion, as well as a number of New Zealand quarter mile champions. So he showed that not only could he play sport, he could certainly coach it. The Second World War intervened, and that was the end of athletics coaching for a while, and Alan was then an intelligence officer during World War II, having started out as a lowly gunner in the army, and experienced one of the most rapid promotions in the history of the military, because by the afternoon he'd been recruited to the intelligence section and then went on to serve there for the remainder of the war. After the war, he was offered a job in the Auckland Star and went on to become a famous, very well known, I should say, feature writer and chief photographer. And during that career, he covered some of Auckland's most notorious and bizarre crimes, including the Bassett Road murders and the Eric Mario wife poisoning case. Alan was able to get a number of photographs that no one else was able to get anywhere close to. He was later awarded the New Zealand Order of Merit for his services to sport and journalism. At the end of his working life, Alan then retired, and that's not quite the right word to use, up to Whangaparāoa Peninsula to his beloved Arkles Bay, where he became the Commodore of the Manly Sailing Club, Commodore of the Waiti Boating Club's Youth Division, and President of the Manly Bowling Club, as well as Chairman of the Auckland P-Class and Starling Yachting Committees. He also helped several young sailors who would later become rather well-known, people such as Russell Cootes and Chris Dixon during that time. He also threw himself into the local community and perhaps became best known in our community anyway for his rather heroic and determined efforts to stop set netting at Arkles Bay Beach, where the dolphins were getting killed and the local community intimidated, and Alan almost single-handedly took on this group of thugs and persevered with a rather less than helpful council to ensure that a set netting bylaw went and in due course became something of a local hero up in the Whangaparāoa Peninsula. He also wrote his own autobiography at 96 years of age, which was a good seller, a few years having earlier written a national bestseller biography of Fred Allen, who was a long-time friend of his. And I'll perhaps just finish, ladies and gentlemen, with a quote from Fred Allen, who certainly wasn't known for giving out compliments kindly, but this is what Fred said of Alan Sayers. "Throughout the years I have come to know Alan Sayers as one of nature's gentlemen with impeccable integrity. He is a man who cares about people. His contribution to his country has seldom been equalled."
Thank you very much, Councillor Watson. That's very interesting and moving tribute.
Thanks, John.
Well done, John.
Right, we now go back to our agenda. Apologies, none have been received. Yeah, Councillor Quacks, I think, for early departure. We get through our business expeditiously. That may not be necessary. So I move that we accept the apology from Councillor Quacks for early departure. Have a seconder. All those in favour, please say aye. To the contrary, no. Carried. Are there any declarations of interest? Confirmation of minutes. We have the minutes of our governing body of the 27th of July 2017. I'll move that we confirm those minutes. So it's been seconded by Councillor Wayne Walker. All those in favour, please say aye. To the contrary, no. Carried. Petitions. No petitions have been received. Public input. We had 4 requests and they were declined. They were all in respect to weed management, and they were declined on the basis that one requester had spoken to Environment and Community Committee, which is obviously the same group as we are here, and the delegation for this issue lies with the Environment and Community Committee, and the other 3 were declined on the same basis. This committee has set up a political advisory group. It's expected to report back on the in October on the implementation of our weed management policy, and having delegated the authority to that committee, which consists of all councillors, is the appropriate place for those for that public input to be made.
Good morning for poisoning children this morning, isn't it? Lovely day out there.
I'm sorry, you have not been invited to speak. You have heard the reason why. You are welcome, as you have always been, to make representations in the properly accepted manner, and I ask you to respect the way in which the council operates.
Mr. Mayor, I do appreciate what you said, but you're not respecting the community because we are being denied any kind of hearing, any kind of understanding of what is going on. All the committees, the workshops, they're all closed to the public, and quite frankly, the idea that because I asked to speak to the Environment Committee about the setup for the political advisory group.
I'm sorry.
Which I asked.
I'm
that the
sorry
public
to
be able attend.
interrupt you.
Stop coming here, just stop poisoning us, and we
If you
won't come
don't
again.
respect the
How can we
procedures,
respect you?
if you don't respect
us.
the procedures of this meeting, I will have to ask you to leave. Okay, we now move to local body input.
Can we just
There-
ask for one clarification, Mr. Mayor?
No,
because
I want to make this point.
Dealing
I'm
with-
sorry, I'm speaking. I want to make this point very clearly. It is not true that the matter is being discussed in committees that are not open to public access. The Environment and Community Committee, a committee of the whole, is held here. We have heard from the various groups at different times, and it is done in public. You
No,
do
we
have the
have not
opportunity
discussed
to make
this, sir.
representations.
And you
No,
still
sir.
But I'm,
Yes, but we
I am
asked for
sorry, you are
representation
interrupting
and
the
we-
procedures of this committee
We have
unreasonably
been denied.
because you know that the delegation has gone to the committee of the whole
Yes.
to hear the issues that
But
you're
they have
interested in.
refused
I
from
could,
the
could
day
I
this
please
committee was
ask
on, they
you
have
to
refused,
be
sir.
seated? If you wish to continue to take advantage, as is of your right, to the democratic procedures of this council, you'll do so in the same way that everybody else is required to do so, which is to go to the appropriate committee to make your
But
representation.
will you accept us?
No,
but
I'm
that's
sorry. I'm not entertaining further discussion from your group. If you wish to take advantage of the proper procedures, you're welcome to do so.
So
You're
can
not
you
welcome to
advise
break
us?
the rules and the standing orders of this committee.
Can you
I'm
advise
now
us then
moving to
how
extraordinary.
how we
I'm
ask for
sorry, if you keep interrupting,
And when
I'm
are we
going to
going
have
to
to
get
ask
that,
you to
sir?
leave.
when are we going to
I'm-
get that representation?
You
sir?
will need
When-
to
when are
you
we
will
allowed
need to
to
raise it in the proper committee.
But will you
But we
accept us?
have, but we have done, sir.
I'm sorry,
We already
I've
have.
made a ruling on this matter, and if you continue to interrupt, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. I don't want to do that, but I will do that.
But you won't
Go
accept
back
us.
into the streets where they put glyphosate
Okay.
every week, no problem.
Sorry, you are disturbing
Yes, of
the
course we're disturbing.
meeting.
You're poisoning.
You have been asked to respect our procedures and standing orders. I'm now going to adjourn this meeting while you are escorted from the meeting.
Yes,
Thank you.
sure. We go.
You just keep talking like that, Phil.
And Councillors, I'm sorry for that interruption. We'll now resume the meeting. I just will make the comment that we welcome people here to make input. We welcome the exercise of their democratic right, but when people don't observe the rules and procedures that are properly set down, then there will be sanctions for that. And I will not meet with people who don't observe the democratic rules of this institution, and that will be one of the first sanctions.
Let's do this.
Local board input, there is none. In
Point
case
of
you didn't
order,
hear
Mr
me.
Mayor.
Point of order.
Point of order.
Point of order. Councillor Casey.
Can we guarantee them access to the Environment and Community Committee public
They-
forum? Because that's what they're asking for.
Yeah, Councillor, they have that already, and they know they have that. They will be invited to talk to the working group. Councillor Holz, you might like to comment on that. If it was a case of denying people's rights, we'd all be upset. They are not having their rights denied. They're simply being referred to the appropriate committee that has the delegation for this area.
They are under the impression that they've been denied access to that particular committee.
I'll ask Councillor Holz maybe to speak
And
to
I'm
that.
happy to clarify, and thank you, Mr Mayor, for the opportunity to clarify. Nothing could be further from the truth. It's been made very clear to me by councillors around this table that at committee meetings, people want time managed well, and as the chair's role, that's my job. We have public input when people come to talk to us about items that are on the agenda. They know that this is being reported back, and they are welcome to come and speak to the item when it comes back. We think probably in October we're going to be reporting back on Project 17 and the work of the Weed Advisory Group. We also have, Mr Mayor, the Technical Advisory Group that's made up of members of this group. So they have input into the process via that group. So nothing could be further from the truth, and you'll be very cognizant of the fact that the glyphosate reduction policy is being implemented as we speak, and we have a staff member dedicated to overseeing the implementation of that policy. So this has all been made clear on numerous occasions to the group. I'll welcome them warmly to speak to the agenda item when it's reported, and we'll notify them accordingly.
And they will be aware of that, so that makes this more an exercise in publicity than an exercise in protest about denial of rights. Extraordinary items, there are none known. Notices of motion, there are none. We come now to item 10 on the agenda, which is whether to propose an Easter Sunday trading policy. So if I could invite Pania Elliott, Paul Wilson and Katarina Maki to the table, please. In process, could I ask Councillor Fesso Collins to move the recommendation that we have in front of us? I will second that. We'll hear from our officials. It may be that you want to ask questions. I think mainly people will want to speak to the motion, but I will, for the sake of procedure, ask if there are specific questions first. But I think it'll be more by way of councillors expressing their views rather than asking questions, because I think the paper is very full and self-explanatory, but there will be the opportunity for questions. Can we hear from officials, please? Oh, sorry, I didn't put the...
I'm happy to move.
Oh, it's been moved and seconded. Okay.
E ngā mata āwaka, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Your Worship the Mayor, councillors, good morning. Pane will just very briefly outline a few key points from the report that may aid your discussion, and then of course staff will be available for any questions you might have.
Tēnā koutou katoa, talofa lava. Thank you. I'll just run through quickly so you'll be aware we had a range of mixed views through the community engagement process. So we had a representative survey which showed 55% of Aucklanders were in favour of option 2, more shops open. What the self-selecting survey showed 68% of Aucklanders were in favour of the status quo, and local boards, those that fed back to us, were largely in favour of the status quo. Excluding one, and we sought to, through this process, weigh up the findings of community engagement, our impacts assessment against Council's strategic objectives, and the economic and community engagement processes. So that brought us to our recommendation of retaining the status quo. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that very succinct outline of it. Are there any questions, first of all? Otherwise, Councillor Cooper.
Thank you. My question's more around, so if this didn't pass today and we went to, because this isn't about deciding the right and wrongs of this today, it's the choice is keep it as a status quo or open it up to public consultation. Okay, so, and I'm not attached either way about the outcome, but my question is, if, for example, today this didn't pass and the other option of opening it up to public consultation and a hearing, so if we as councillors made comments falling one way or the other about the rights and the wrongs of opening or closing, would that make us unavailable to be part of a hearing?
Through the chair and the Democracy Services may wish to jump in at some point.
Because we've shown a bias one way or the other.
My understanding of how the process works would be so long as you enter into that next process with an open mind, which you're obliged to do under the Act, then you would be okay to sit on a hearings panel to make that decision.
Yes, but if you've made public statements which have been live streamed on record saying you agree to open on Sunday or don't, does that, the perception, is that an issue?
Officer can't answer that.
Just to clarify, as long as in the next phase, all councillors are of an open mind, then no. I would note, though, the process outlined in the paper, if you want to consult on an Easter Sunday trading policy, is a have your say process, not a hearing process,
Right,
and would
okay.
come directly back to the governing body.
So that would be okay. Okay, thank you.
I think that solves the dilemma, obviously.
that's great, thank
It would put councillors in an impossible position if by expressing an opinion on this issue, and everybody has an opinion on this issue, they weren't therefore able to take part in subsequent
I'm
proceedings.
just
But
making sure
I think
it's
that
a fair
answers it.
process if it was,
Yeah.
Mr Chairman. Yeah.
Exactly right. If there are no other questions, sorry, Councillor Simpson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have just got two questions, please. One is the background to the historic exemption for Parnell. It's an anomaly. I'd like to know a little bit more about that if I can. And the second one, I noticed that, was it 28 other councils have agreed to trade on Easter Sunday, is that correct? And I'd just like to know which ones they are and whether they're little ones or ones that are potentially larger cities. Thank you.
In answer to your question through the chair, I think we had this discussion at the last time about Parnell, and the conclusion was that there is generally no rhyme or reason sometimes for why some areas got Easter trading exemptions over others. I do know that His Worship the Mayor actually contributed the most information to answer that question last time.
Right, I just thought you'd done some more work since then, so I was just asking. Sorry, no. Okay. And the other councils?
Not specifically on the Parnell decision, no.
And the other councils?
The other councils was the other part of the question, Kat?
Yeah, so thank you. Regarding the other councils, I understand Christchurch is making a move to make a decision against adopting a policy. Wellington hasn't done anything, and we're considering now as Auckland, but it tends to be the smaller councils that have considered whether or not to adopt a policy. I'm not quite sure of the tally either way. You would have seen Hamilton as well recently decided to retain the status quo, but so it's a bit of a mixed bag at the minute. Yeah.
Great, thank you. There appear to be no other questions, so we'll move into the debate, and maybe I'll start off by making a few comments of my own. We'll all be under the time constraint that usually applies. I think during my time in Parliament, it came before Parliament 11 times, and on each occasion, Parliament failed to be able to resolve this issue, and courageously they've now passed it to us, which might be described as a hospital pass. In Parliament it's a conscience issue, and I'm sure that of the 21 of us around this table, we all have our own specific views, and we ought to respect each other's views on that. My own decision is to support the recommendation, which preserves the status quo. And I do that not for any particular religious reason, though the origin of the public holiday and keeping it commercial free was very likely religious. I'm in favour of preserving the 3.5 days out of 365 days of the year where we don't extend commercialisation to those days. And I do it because for me and for my family, these are special times of the year. And make no mistake, if it's Easter Sunday now that becomes commercialised, the next step will be Good Friday, because the same arguments will apply, maybe Christmas Day, and even conceivably Anzac Day. Each one of those days is a special time of the year for us to have with our families, where most of us are fortunate in not being obliged to work. Christmas, great time of the year in the summer. Easter, you know, the last break that we have, the time that we can bring our families together before the winter. And that is a time when we can escape commercialisation. And probably, even if this passed, most of us could, but some people couldn't. And I ask whether it's fair to say for us to put pressure on those people working in the retail sector that they have to give up this special time of the year. I know that the legislation says you cannot be compelled to, but put yourself in the position of a retail worker, particularly in a small business, where the boss asks you to work, and I ask the question, do you really have that absolute freedom to say no? And it's not just that it's not just the workers, it's actually the retailers themselves. I'm sure most of those retailers treasure the time that they have off. But if you're running a small business and suddenly it's open for everybody to open on Easter Sunday, you're going to feel compelled, in order to match your competitors, also to be involved with commercial transactions on that day. I'm also mindful of the fact that many of our retail workers come from the Maori and the Pacifica communities, and for them, for many of them, Easter Sunday does have strong religious significance. And I don't believe that they should be forced to make that choice, whether to observe this day or to observe the desire, the request from an employer to work on it. In the Colmar-Brunton poll, it shows that there are probably a majority of people in favour of commercialising Easter Sunday. On our online public engagement poll, it, however, shows something different. It shows that for those that feel strongly about the issue, an overwhelming majority are against commercialising Easter Sunday. I think for most people, yeah, it might be nice to go shopping, but do we need to? Does every day actually have to be a shopping day in the year? I don't think that everything should be about the mighty dollar. I think we should respect the ability of families on these special occasions to have that time together without feeling the pressure of needing to go to work. Easter Sunday for families is something that personally I want to see protected, and I'll be voting in that way. Councillor Collins.
Thank you, Sue. I'd just like to note that I'll reserve my right for a right of reply at the end as mover. I just wanted to table a petition that I've received from 2,000 people from First Union who are here today, who are the workers that you've just referred to. I want to thank them for this petition, and I think it should be noted that I have it with me that these people have signed a petition to say we don't want to commercialise Easter Sunday. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Newman.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I'm clear that Easter Sunday should remain a day of reverence for those of us who believe in the resurrection, and a day of rest for all. Your Worship, a decade ago, Caritas, it's an international organisation of Catholic agencies, told a parliamentary select committee that decisions affecting people's working lives should be informed by the impact on those workers, particularly those who are the poorest and the most vulnerable. So I don't believe that liberalising Easter Sunday for shop trading contributes to work-life balance. I don't believe that it contributes to the well-being of families of whānau of Ainga. I do not believe that the community wins because retailers have more choice beyond the 361 and 1/2 days that are already available for trade. Not only do I attend Mass on Easter Sunday, but I do take heart from a Catholic teaching that emphasises that there is a right to rest and to a right to religious observance as a worker's right rather than an individual preoccupation. Now, philosophically, I tend to believe in the primacy of voluntary association and individual contracting, but and I wouldn't normally assign a collective right because I generally prefer an individual's right to negotiate. But to me, that principle doesn't apply in relation to Easter Sunday because the right to rest and religious observance is paramount. Your Worship, I wanted to take an early call on this because I wanted to address a view that I believe is an incorrect view, and that is that this is an issue where a minority sectional interest is merely trying to impose a narrow world view. Those of us who profess a faith, we argue for the right to that religious observance, but equally the right to rest, and that is a right that is assigned to all. I don't require people to come to church, but I hope that everybody enjoys their day off. Your Worship, it has been 27 years since we lost 51 Sundays. And now we are arguing about the preservation of the 52nd Sunday, which is on Easter Sunday. So yesterday I had the opportunity to reflect to Councillor Quack's my view that not only should the governing body uphold Easter Sunday as a day of rest, but that I would hope that the vote would be an overwhelming one on that view, because I think that there needs to be a clear signal that there is a broad consensus emerging around this, that Auckland is a multi-ethnic and progressive place, and that we can be a bastion for the idea that rest still matters. So I also want to acknowledge Maxine Gay from the First Union, and I had penned an op-ed piece that I planned to submit to Maxine to consider as a joint statement, but I didn't do so because her advocacy is formidable and she doesn't need my reflections to sustain her argument. But Your Worship, in conclusion, I do want to say this, that I am a product of South Auckland, and as such I don't believe that you can be a product of the South and not be affected by that. There are thousands of my constituents who are church-going Māori and Pacifica people, and they place a strong emphasis on religious observance and the need for protection from the subtle expectation that Easter Sunday is going to be a day of work for them, and that weighs heavily on my conscience. So, Your Worship, I consider that the most important thing is to vote for the preservation of Easter Sunday trading because I genuinely believe that that contributes to the health and well-being of families, whānau and ainga in my community, and that is the paramount consideration for this debate. Thank you.
Kia ora.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor John Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As a small retailer, I can sympathise with those people who wanted one day off. We shouldn't be just commercialising the Easter Sunday for the sake of commercialising it. I'll be voting for the status quo because as a small retailer, it comes up to the staff. They want to take a holiday and it comes back to the owner. The owner works very hard in retail. And for that reason, we shouldn't be pursuing the status quo. I want the status quo preserved.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor John Watson.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and along with fellow Councillor Walker there, I also support the status quo, and basically for three reasons. That the first one is one alluded to by Councillor Newman, that the status quo protects the faith values for those in our society who hold them very important, and I would suggest for quite a lot of other people who might not be classified as Christian or churchgoers but use Easter as a period of reflection and rest. So they might not necessarily be going to church, but there is often a spiritual element to this time of the year. The second reason is to do with family life. I think there are increasing incursions into time where families can be together, and Easter is one of those few times now where that opportunity exists. And the third and final reasons I have is to do with preserving the rapidly eroded workers' rights, and that goes to both the retail staff and as Councillor Walker said, and as to the owners and managers who are also affected by this. And certainly some of the submissions I received in favour of the status quo were from people in management who also felt strongly. I would just like, Mr Mayor, to very quickly question the notion that is sometimes put up as an argument for liberalising the Easter trading in terms of the ability of employers to use the protections of the Act. I think that doesn't reflect reality on the ground at all, that many workers are very vulnerable, and particularly in the retail sector, and would be in a very awkward position if they were having to start invoking any Act to ensure that they had the right to observe Sunday if they wanted to. I don't think that would roll out in reality at all. And finally, I would just like to make a couple of international comparisons, which can always be useful in circumstances like this. We're currently sitting at our 3.5 days, would reduce to 2.5 if some people had their way. In Japan, which is looked upon as a country with an incredible work ethic and a reluctance to take holidays, they have 17 national government recognised public holidays per year. And that's similar in China and Hong Kong. 17. In the United States, there are 11 federal holidays and 10 annual holidays. In the UK, there's 8 public holidays. So by any comparison where you look around the world, New Zealand is right down the lower end of public holidays where family life can be developed or people can have a little bit of a rest. So I would think retaining our rather paltry 3.5 in relation to the Japanese economic machine of 17 is more than an adequate a balance. But I just would like, by way of conclusion, to say that I think this is an issue that people have spoken quite strongly on, and I think the way people have spoken in terms of our communities is to retain Easter Sunday and to retain the status quo, and I'm sure that's what's going to end up happening. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Richard Hills.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I'm happy with the status quo. I'm not religious, and I don't necessarily know if it's the strongest argument, because there's so many other religious holidays for many religions throughout the year that we don't observe holidays, but I respect the reason for Easter. But my main thing about keeping it is because of the chance to have some time with family, have a time to experience all the awesomeness of Auckland actually outside of the walls of a mall. You know, there's a lot to do when there's nothing to do. And I think that it's important that, you know, it's only 3.5 days a year that we protect this one that we might be giving away, because there's so many opportunities to just do nothing and just relax. And there's a sort of calm in the air, and it's like Christmas Day, you know, the next step I would worry is that we start saying, well, Christmas Day should be open to everyone as well. It's sort of this weird calm around the place that actually just feels good, and you can spend time, talk to people. You know, the best 4 days of my childhood sometimes with those Easter holidays, going camping, doing different things. And it was just the fact that I knew that my parents were not working, everyone else wasn't working, and there was things to do, just chilling out. The other thing is, as a previous hospitality and retail worker, I know how hard it was, and I was manager as well, how hard it was when we were open in hospitality on these days for the young people especially to say, look, I really can't work this weekend, I don't want to work. And I know often, it wasn't often spoken, but they were sort of felt they were forced or had to work because there was no one to work as it is. So if we open that up more, I know there will be many people of all backgrounds, but especially, I believe, young people who will feel they cannot say no to working these holidays and will go ahead. And also, when your boss is there and going, look, no one else is working, you've got to, you know, you're pretty happy to have a job or a weekend job or a holiday job, and you're going to say, okay, I better work. So I worry about vulnerable workers being pushed into a situation where, you know, the law protects them, but you also have to know how to how to work the law, how to talk to a union, how to talk to a lawyer, how to talk to human resources, and for a lot of people that is a foreign body. So we can all say, you know, the law will protect you, but the law is quite difficult to navigate, and especially when you've got a job and you've got a good job and you want to keep it, it's often you don't want to rock the boat. So I think that's important that we protect, you know, these days, not for some conservative, antiquated, you know, harking back old days. I think it's just awesome that we can have a couple days which are clear for family, for relaxing, and for making sure that people actually get a genuine day off with families, because that's becoming less and less available with all the 24 hours of the employment cycle. And also, if you're, you know, I feel for some businesses who say they want, you know, to be open, but if your business model relies on, you know, an extra day, you know, then I think maybe that your business isn't doing as great as it could be if you need that extra day throughout the year. So I'm pretty sure most people can cover that day off. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Simpson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I might be a bit of a lone voice. I'm not saying that Easter trading is right for every part of Auckland. I'm not saying that at all. But I believe that the status quo is a little bit archaic, outdated and unfair. I think we need to promote business, and we need to also support our visitor strategy. So I'm saying let's develop a policy that allows opportunity and fairness, that allows the visitors whom we work so hard to attract to benefit and contribute to our economy. People who work on a public day can have another day off in lieu. But I don't understand why, when we have an obvious request from heart of the city, that we are saying no to that opportunity to trade in one of our biggest visitor-based locations that we have. And I don't understand why, when we have an archaic historic exemption for Parnell that no one really seems to understand what or how that came about, are we not allowing support for Newmarket to trade when we've invested thousands of dollars in improving that business district as a premier fashion shopping and entertainment sector? So I can't vote for the status quo just because I think it is unfair. And finally, my vote is based, as always, on my, my research within my own area. And I note that the Ōrākei Local Board is quoted as voting for the status quo. I spoke to the chairman last night. They only had 3 or 4 responses. So based on the fact that it wasn't enough to make a decision, they went for the status quo. But I've researched all our residents' associations and business associations. And their response to me was, even though some of them don't open on a Sunday, is you should allow it to happen if people want it in the areas where there are high volumes of retail request. So for that, I'm actually not going to support the status quo, and I think we should work to develop a policy especially for the CBD. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Fletcher.
Well, thank you, Mr Mayor. I don't want to repeat what have been excellent contributions to the debate thus far on the importance of rest and renewal. All I really want to do is just remind people that we throw away our history at our peril. For us to be the multicultural, open city that we want the world to see, we do need to understand the traditions that have built us into where we are today. We've grown out of biculturalism. Without understanding the biculturalism, we will not be able to undertake multiculturalism, I think, to its fullest. And some might feel awkward about a discussion that entails the Christian values that underpinned European settlement in New Zealand, but that is, like it or not, part of the tradition of our country. My question, though, is to you. I find it completely unacceptable, given the importance of Easter Sunday in my family and the fact that some of us come from different parts of New Zealand to be together. I find it absolutely unacceptable that Parliament has dumped this on councils around the country. And we're going to have potentially a whole range of different policies for families on a day that is one that we traditionally have shared together. So I'd like to know what we are doing, Mr Mayor, in terms of advocacy back to our parliamentary friends and colleagues to say, please let this not be a precedent for other difficult decisions that Parliament is grappling with. And I'd really welcome your input on this, and perhaps you may care to, along with the mover, Councillor Collins, add a B to the effect that our disapproval of this as a matter that should be preoccupying the time of this council when we are looking for a unified approach to policy across New Zealand on such a sacrosanct day.
I think I could agree, Councillor, that if they devolved funding to us instead of decisions that were too hard for them to make, we'd be better off. I would just note for the record, I voted against that bill in Parliament. Councillor,
But is there something that we can...
Look, it's in the hands of council. I think that you've put it on the record already, rightly, as I have, and I think other councillors would feel the same way. Whether it's necessary to write it into the record is entirely up to you. If you'd like to move an amendment, that's in your hands. You might like to take. There's a couple of more speakers. If you want to just take a moment, if you want to draft a further amendment, then we can put that to councillors. Councillor Filipaina.
Oh, this is quite good because I will support any amendment Councillor Fletcher wishes to put through in regards to your comment, because I totally agree. Also totally agree with the tradition and everything else. So, Your Worship, definitely will support and second if you need a second for your amendment, Councillor Fletcher. Your Worship, I'm just going to be short and sweet in regards to my time and talking. There was earlier was mentioned 28 other councils had sort of made a decision around Easter trading, and I note that there's 78 local, regional and unitary plan councils in New Zealand. So the ratio there, I think, is a very good indicator in regards to the other areas. So and this is the main reason why I'm supporting it, is that I looked at it putting the religion aside. I mean, I am, contrary to what some of my colleagues think, I am religious. There you go. So putting that aside, the choice I had was business or family. Now, Councillor Newman mentioned whānau, ainga, family, and my choice is family. I took into account, Councillor Hills, when you ended up having your first talk around this when it came here, and you mentioned the fact that you're going on the Easter holidays with your parents and everything else, and it was just so cool from a family perspective. So my choice is family over business, and so therefore then I will be supporting status quo. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Linda Cooper.
Thank you. If I can just ask a question, something's occurred to me first, if that would be okay with you, Mr. Mayor. Is there an option here to be able to investigate or come back if we want to say, look, for example, that radius of cruise ship operations, Newmarket CBD, and that it'd only be for that, for example, or does Parliament have to decide on another exemption like Parnell? Because I hate to think that cruise ships, it's like we're closed, New Zealand's closed today, and I mean that just, it's very few and far between. It's right at the end of the cruise ship operations, but it may be something that is a compromise.
Through the Chair, so Parliament has delegated the authority to you as a governing body to make all decisions now and in the future about Easter Sunday trading. So there will be no decision making by government in Auckland on this matter. You will note you can make future decisions.
Oh, so we could do that in the future.
However, for this particular decision, if you look at paragraph 26, we outline why we did not propose a partial policy in places like the CBD. But you still have future decision making at your disposal as always.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to make sure that wasn't cut off for the future. So for me, I mean, we do hear about the South, and very importantly, a very high Pacifica population, and often a related, real commitment to the Christian faith, and absolutely respect that. And So consequently, Henderson-Massey local board is the next highest Pacifica population, and so in Councillor Hulse, my ward, we have a lot of Pacifica churches, a lot of people that really value that time, especially that weekend. But we also have the highest percentage of local jobs are in retail as well. So that means that, you know, there's quite a high chance that a lot of people on low retail wages will be also in that group of people who want to preserve that day. And I am concerned about family time impact, and I do question the financial benefits for just one day for businesses, as some other people have said. But I do see the status quo is very messy, and that's my biggest concern. Because it is, you know, there's exemptions here, there's exemptions there. You know, there's so many shops that are allowed to open. It's very confusing for people. So I do feel that the status quo isn't ideal either. And I do, part of me feels that, yes, we've done some targeted type of consultation, but I don't think it's been as open as it could be. And that speaks to me for democracy. You know, a bit more of a chance for people to have a say, and that is my concern, and that's no disrespect to what our staff have done. They've had a very limited time frame to do this in, but it does concern me that maybe more people have not had a chance. When I look at the demographics that have been responding and have been chosen, it isn't exactly across the board in terms of our 1.5 million people in our region, or the geographical area either. So that concerns me. I am going to support this, but those are my riders. You know, I don't think it's been a great process, but I would like to see, and I'm not going to put up an amendment now, I think it could be another piece of work. It does concern me. You know, we have high tourism, which does provide great number of jobs in Auckland here. So I would maybe in the future, it would be good to see us looking at the opportunity for the CBD in Newmarket, which is in that kind of cruise ship radius, and where a lot of visitors come to Auckland at Easter, a lot. And they do come for the difference that they can get from the small towns and those opportunities. So I think I'd like to just sort of reserve that space, that might be an opportunity, but definitely out in our suburbs and our wider region, I don't see a need. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Cooper, could I just seek clarification on para 22? It has certain shops are currently permitted to open, and these include, and then you've got garden centres. My understanding was that the garden centres were opening illegally. Can you just provide some clarification of that?
That's correct.
Yeah, Mr. Chair. My understanding is that garden centres basically petitioned government to allow an exemption, but that doesn't extend to hardware stores that may be attached to garden centres.
Okay.
Only plants.
Yeah.
So, yeah, just for sake of clarity, if you're solely a garden centre, you are able to open, but if you're attached to a major supermarket or, you know, Bunnings or whatever, you're not. That's the rule.
I believe that hardware shops that have garden centre areas have to shut off the hardware area.
They could just open, yeah. I see a nod from the back of the room from some unofficial advice from Maxine, but okay, that is apparently correct. Thank you very much for that. Councillor Sharon Stewart.
Thank you. Just practically everything's really been said, but I'll be supporting the status quo, mainly because it's a time for family, and I think family values is something that we really need to address, and I will support also Councillor Fletcher's amendment there, and I think it is a shame that central government has left it to the local government to have to debate this today. So really, I think everything's really been said, so I will be supporting the status quo. And I have to agree, looking at item 22, just about all the services that are really needed. We've got service stations, dairies, pharmacies, restaurants, takeaways, all the services that perhaps we may require are already there, so I think we're really providing the service that we need. And if we decide to do away with Easter, I think you're quite right. People will start thinking about Christmas. So, yeah, supports.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Denise Lee.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. It's sort of incredibly vexed and at times messy argument. I'm reluctant, Mr Mayor, to categorise the topic under faith, family or business. I think each of us would have more aptitude towards one of those or some of those or all of those categories. So I'd just like to keep my comments to a broader, wider impact in regards to our regional role. Just back on that vexed topic though, I just note that some of us have referred to the possibility that young people might feel forced to work, but then I pick up, for instance, in the Rainbow Panel commentary that they brought up that in some instances young people might like the opportunity for an extra day's pay. So there's going to be always arguments on both sides. Back to our regional wider role, I'm really taking note of paragraph 38 where the staff team have brought up that they consider that there will be a minimal contribution to the Auckland economy as a whole by relaxing the laws. In other words, supporting the status quo. I'll take on board what is said in that regard. It looks like what you're referring to is just a transfer of spending from, say, small to larger retailers. So for me, that was really the turning point for me to support the status quo, but I'll be doing that reluctantly. I have really taken on board Councillor Simpson and Cooper's comments about what a shame it is that the resolution is so small and tight and doesn't allow for some of that geographic specifics that we could have done. I agree, Linda, that in the future we should have the courage to undertake partial geographic decision making where we need to. And for that reason, I won't be supporting B because we're not Otrahonga, we're not Queenstown. We should be able to make our own calls based on Auckland and get down to parts of Auckland that may benefit from some relaxed trading laws. So I will reluctantly be voting for the status quo, taking on board that we will see a minimal impact to the Auckland economy if we choose anything else. And I'll finish on one last note. Much to my surprise, one of my business associations in my area, the one that I'd probably least expect it from, surveyed their members, and 90% of their members, small retailers, would wish to retain the status quo.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Last speaker, Councillor Clow.
I'll be brief, and there's got to be at least one agnostic around the table, so I will just point out I'm just going to stick with the status quo, no question about it, and I'm just against basically the rampant consumerism and commercialisation of every day of the year, and I'm over it, and yeah, it's not for me, and so status quo.
Thank you very much, Councillor. And in reply, Councillor Fessa-Collins.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. I've really enjoyed this discussion, and I think people will remember from when it first came to the table, I had some really poignant things to say, especially around our community in, as the elected member, one of the elected members for Manukau. 80% of the respondents in Māngere Otahu, Otara Papatoetoe came back and they said through this public consultation that they wanted us to maintain the status quo. The manager of the Newmarket Business Association agrees with Councillor Fletcher and says they don't understand why the government gave this back to councils, and that's why I've been happy to incorporate Part B in the proposal or in the recommendation. I've tabled a petition today we've received from First Union of workers who are saying they don't want to be forced. And this is not necessarily about being forced, but it's the pressure that vulnerable workers will have when their employers tell them, we want you to work on that day. This is about standing with vulnerable workers and vulnerable employees. And people have said this isn't a religious discussion. Well, it's not, but keep this in mind. There are a number of social commentators that are saying that consumerism is the new religion in New Zealand. And perhaps perhaps what's happened is the economic imperative has become the new mighty dollar and mighty God. Perhaps, maybe that's what Councillor Clow was referring to. I wanted to offer a personal reflection on this, which is why I will be voting in favour of maintaining the status quo. On Easter Sunday, my family wake up, we usually get up in time for church, but we'll gather around our breakfast table, because unlike the many vulnerable families, my family has the ability to at least have Weet-Bix in the morning. We'll hold hands around that table, about to have our breakfast, about to have our Weet-Bix, and my daughter will pray, and she'll say, thank you, Lord, that we're able to have family time. Thank you that I can chill out. That's the kind of language. Hey, how about that for new kinds of prayers? That I can chill out with mum and daddy-o. Then we'll get ready, we'll go to church, and Easter Sunday just passed, we went to Mass in Otara at St. John's, the Evangelist, with Father Brian. And I get around, and that's not bad for a person who was raised a charismatic. And then after that, we will go and meet with the rest of our family who have all taken that day off, who've all had the right to take that day off, and we'll share a big to'onai, a lovely lunch together, and we'll be able to enjoy spending time with each other. And if it's not at the park in Otahuhu, it'll be at Starling Park Playground in Ranui. That's where we'll go. Sir, I am endorsing this council, this table, to vote for the status quo so that the families of Auckland can have just that opportunity. The chance to spend some time with their families. The chance for mum or dad who's working hard out, as hard as they can, to chill out with their families. The chance to play at a park. The chance, if they wish, to observe Resurrection Sunday. Because I'll tell you what it's about in our community. It's about hope. It's about a new beginning. Very good. And it's about opening the only door that should have been open, and that was a tomb that we talk about in the scriptures. Sir, I am advancing to this table. Let's vote in favour of this so that our families have a breather, so that our families have some time together, so that the city would meet its strategic objectives to give this place, to give our people the opportunity to leisure, to family time, and to some rest. And so I want to commend this recommendation to this table, and I'm excited that the people of Manukau have come out strongly in favour, overwhelmingly in favour, and I want to endorse those who have spoken for this recommendation this morning. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Collins, spoken from the heart. I'm going to put the resolution...
By division.
It's been called by division. That was my second question, but we'll take it by division. But I'm going to separate the A from the B because I notice Councillor Lee expressed a desire to vote for one part of the resolution, not for the other. So we'll do it. That's for the section B of the resolution. Yes. So we have. We'll do it by division. So I'll ask our officers to take the voting call. First of all, on A of the resolution.
Councillors, you're voting on item 10, clause A. Mayor Goff.
Aye.
Councillor Casey.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Cashmore.
That was
Yes.
wrong. Put against.
Councillor...
Casey should be the other side.
Councillor Clow.
Yes.
Councillor Collins.
For.
Councillor Cooper. For. Councillor Darby.
For.
Councillor Filipina.
Aye.
Councillor Fletcher.
Yes.
Councillor Hills.
Yes, please.
Councillor Hulse.
Aye.
Councillor Denise Lee.
For.
Councillor Mike Lee.
Aye.
Councillor Newman.
For.
Councillor Quacks.
For.
Councillor Sayers.
For.
Councillor Simpson.
Against.
Councillor Stewart.
For.
Councillor John Walker.
For.
Councillor Wayne Walker.
Yes.
Councillor Watson.
Yes.
So the resolution has been carried 20 votes to 1. I'll declare that part of the resolution passed. We now come to B of the resolution.
Division.
And you want that done by division as well, so we'll ask officers to take the vote call.
Councillors, you're voting on item 10, clause B. Mayor Goff.
For.
Councillor Casey.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Cashmore.
No.
Councillor Clow.
No.
Councillor Collins.
For.
Councillor Cooper.
Against.
Councillor Darby.
Against.
Councillor Filipaina.
Aye.
Councillor Fletcher.
For.
Councillor Hills.
Against.
Councillor Hulse.
Aye.
Councillor Denise Lee.
Against.
Councillor Mike Lee.
It doesn't add to it.
Aye.
Councillor Newman.
Or.
Councillor Quacks.
For.
Councillor Sayers.
Or.
Councillor Simpson.
Against.
Councillor Stewart.
For.
Councillor Sir John Walker.
For.
Councillor Wayne Walker.
Yes.
Councillor Watson.
Or.
That will be carried.
Well done, Chris.
So resolution B is carried by 14 votes to 7. Thank you very much, councillors. I think that was a good debate, and yeah, I think people respected each other's views on that.
Now that the vote has been done, Mayor, please accept these Easter eggs on our behalf. I'm sure you will agree they're much better eaten with families. No, but we'll give you an egg, Linda, okay?
I declined to accept one before the vote on the basis that that might be treating, but after the vote I think it's probably okay.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Mayor.
So,
Councillor Fletcher.
thousands of retail workers, thank you.
Mr. Mayor,
Fletcher.
it would be insightful to know how much the policy work on this has cost this council thus far. In financial terms.
Katarina.
$52,700.
$52,700 we have spent on this, not counting our time today.
And that was to meet the requirement, thank you, to meet the requirement that we must consult and get feedback on it. And we actually voted. I think I understand your point, councillor. It would have been better if it wasn't necessary, but it was in the instance. Okay.